Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, the earth-friendly publisher with books for both adults and children in a wide variety of genres, available in paperback and hardcover, as ebooks, and with some audiobooks as well. In the Spotlight is a wide-ranging weekly interview show with authors, entrepreneurs, professionals, and other experts. Your host is Cynthia McGregor. Opinions and views expressed by the guests or hosts on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the creator, Crimson Cloak Radio, the network, the hosts, or sponsors. And now, here's Cynthia.
Thank you, Carly McCracken, and welcome everyone to another edition of In the Spotlight. My first guest this week is Marc Yaffee. Marc Yaffee's diverse comedy career has landed him in 43 states and 11 countries. Marc Yaffee may be the only comedian with air, land, and sea show credits. He's entertained Alaska Airline passengers at 30,000 feet, performed on a flatbed truck for U.S. Marines in Iran while getting his head shaved, and done comedy for cruise ship passengers on the high seas. Marc is a co-star of the Showtime special Goin' Native. His new comedy special, Mid-Laugh Crisis, got over 2 million Facebook views in the first 8 days. Marc has also been seen on PBS, the Latino Laugh Festival, and Comics Unleashed. He has performed 6 times overseas for Armed Forces Entertainment, and he won the Venture Comedy Festival's Funniest Person contest in 2012. Funny, not filthy, Marc's relevant and relatable humor skewers sacred cows, dissects societal stupidities, and confronts common frustrations, all with humanity and humor. Latino Laugh Festival, Marc? Funny, but your name doesn't sound Latino.
No, it's a nice Jewish last name. A little bit of myself. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I got to make one quick correction. I entertained the troops in Iraq, not Iran. If we were in Iran, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. Who knows?
Okay, I apologize.
Oh, no big deal. Hey, you know what? It's they're right next to each other. It's one letter off. But my adopted parents. I have a adopted Jewish father and an adopted Mexican American mother, and that was my adopted name. My birth name is Michael Dauber. So I tell people, you might have heard of my parents, Red and Bingo Dauber. So my bingo players out there.
You've got me laughing already, Marc.
All right, we're off to a good start.
Marc is here to share his comedy and talk about his new dry bar comedy special, Mark My Words. He also wants to share his creative and business journey to help anyone interested in pursuing comedy or entertainment in general. Is that right, Marc?
Hey, I think those are some good topics to touch on, and I'm always glad to be one to give some hopefully helpful advice to people that are thinking about breaking entertainment, the pitfalls and the positives of it. You know, we know this business. You've been in the podcast industry. There's ups and downs, and glad to share the journey.
Well, what inspires someone to get into comedy? Let's start with that question.
Well, on my end, I just always had a love of writing and comedy growing up from childhood. So I grew up on All in the Family and Sanford and Son, and Good Times. So I always appreciated good writing. Always loved to laugh. Fortunately, I grew up around a very funny group of people in high school, and just appreciated humor and comedy. Didn't even actually see my first live comedy show until I was probably 25 years old. Saw the late Sam Kennison at a small student union in Cal State Northridge in Southern California. And then I said, I wouldn't mind doing that. And then 20 years later, because I'm a procrastinator, I finally got on stage.
How has your comedy journal differed from others in your industry?
Well, I did it all backwards. That's what I always tell people. I grew up in Los Angeles, the hub of entertainment. Then I was married and living in Northern California at a very small town called Kelseyville, north of Napa Valley, and had left DMV where I used to be a driving examiner. Started teaching traffic school classes. When you got a ticket in California, you used to go up to a in-person class. And so people say, "Hey, you're funny. You should consider doing stand-up." And I went and took a comedy class in Sacramento, California, and took off from there.
And what have been some of your career highs and lows?
Well, premiere highs, like the credits. I was fortunate, to get some TV credits. Showtime, we did this Going Native comedy special, which is the first all Native American stand-up special in television history, as far as I know. And so I'd say that was one of the highs, definitely. That's been about 9 years. Got to work with the late Charlie Hill. He was the host of the show. He was the first Native American to appear on the Johnny Carson show, David Letterman, Richard Pryor. So he really set the path for other Native comedians like myself. Other highs, obviously, it's the Armed Forces Entertainment were always pretty much my favorite shows, and we've gone overseas to Iraq or Bahrain, Japan, North Korea. See, now I'm getting the countries wrong. South Korea. So those are the most appreciative audiences, and those have been great. And I'd say the other career high has been doing some cruise ships for the last year, and that's I'm fortunate enough to work for Holland America Cruise Lines, and they spoil me rotten and feed me and do my laundry, and I just have a 17.5-second walk to work commute from my room to the stage. So hey, you can't beat that. And then lows. We don't want to leave out the lows. Okay, let's see. Been rejected from America's Got Talent, I think 3 times for the auditions. Let's see. Had a sitcom that got we produced, and then that didn't get purchased by the network, and then one of the networks has a show coming out pretty much almost identical to that. So now there's probably some litigation, stuff. So those things like that are some of the struggles that are not unique to me, that you probably have heard some versions from other comedians that you might have interviewed or people might have heard interviewed on radio or media outlets.
So you're a Native American with an adoptive Jewish father and an adoptive Latina mother?
That's pretty close, yeah. So I'm actually not full blood. I'm Mexican, Irish Navajo, Mexaho. So I always tell people see me, there's a Mexicans think I'm Indian, Indians think I'm Asian, and cops think I'm a suspect.
Oh, crap. You're going to crack me up totally by the time the show is over. Oh,
I love your laugh. I love your laugh, by the way. I have to bring you my next CD recording. You got a wonderful laugh. Yeah, so that's it. So grew up in Southern California, pretty diverse. We were practicing that diversity before the word was ever mentioned. Talk about all these diversity, I had I'd go visit my Jewish bubby in the morning after church, and then we go to have bagels and lox, and go see my Mexican grandmother in East LA in the afternoon. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you had bagels and black beans.
Well, I used to. What was my joke? This is one of my early jokes. It wasn't very good. So yeah, my Jewish relatives had bagel and lox. My Mexican relatives had break-ins of lox or something like that. Some tacky stereotype. But no, that would have been a good combination. That doesn't sound too delicious. Bagels and black beans. But you know what? There's so many fusion foods. There's probably some guy doing that in New York City or LA for all we know.
Well, I haven't heard of it yet, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
What are some of your goals going forward, Mark?
Well, besides getting invited back to your podcast, let's see. I am doing the Antelope Valley Comedy Festival. They're trying to make this into a new. There's festivals that pop up around the country, and the bookers produce some other ones like Laughlin Comedy Festival. So I'll be doing that, hoping to win that one and get connected with a good powerhouse agent in Southern California. I've written a couple of TV projects. My friend and I, he's a contractor, and I like to think of myself as a mender. We're trying to pitch a reality show called Mending Fences. So we take two neighbors that are fighting over common areas, walls, sidewalks, fences, and get them together and kind of make peace and end up repairing the project together, like a do-it-yourself show. We hope, and by the end, have them laughing and talking to each other again. So
Great.
that's what. Yeah, I think that would be that's one of my projects. Also, of course, I'd like to hopefully get a Netflix special sooner than later. But they're not handing those out that easily. You have to you have to have a brand name. So really, the name of the game in comedy is to be consistent, stay funny, and hopefully build your fan base. Now it just seems it's gone from the old days. You're like, oh, if you're talented, they'd find you. Now there's so many talented people, and there's so many people not only talented on stage, but they're talented off stage and promoting and networking with fans. And it's a little harder than 20, 30 years ago to stand out in the crowd. But fortunately, with my native background, that does help a bit, and I hopefully can continue to grow my audience out there.
Marc, how has comedy changed since you started?
Well, let's see. There's a lot of things. One, you have social media. I started in '99, and I think maybe there was MySpace. I'm not even sure if we had any. What was going on back then. We didn't even have smartphones yet. So the bookings, we'd still do them by phone. I mean, when someone say a booker would say, "I want to see a tape," you'd literally have to copy a VHS tape and then put my label on it. Then I had a promo packet. I remember. I'd take one of those folders, I'd type up bios and print them, and I'd get some of that. They had this like spray glue. I'd spray my headshot onto the front of the thing, and after I got over the toxic shock from that stuff, and I had to take an envelope, mail it out. It was very old school, and then you'd have to wait for response. Now it's pretty much one click. I just sent out my show avails and my bio and my video to 24 promoters. You have companies that work with you to help promote. So that's one. Social media now, where you used to have a hierarchy of comedy, you go do open mic. Then if they liked you, you do what's called a showcase, and then you become a host maybe on a show where you're the opening act, and then work your way up to half an hour where you can be the middle act, and then work your way up to where you be the headliner. Now, thanks or no thanks to social media, some people have sidestepped or kind of gone around that whole system where they have like a big fan base because they did some YouTube videos or Twitter posts, and now they're branding themselves as a headlining comedian and showing up at a club, and they've never really worked the road or built a library of material, and that's been good and bad for comedy. Probably a little more bad than good.
You were clean, Marc, right? You were clean.
Most of the time. Once in a while, there could be a four-letter word slips out, but my goal wasn't always when I started, but my goal early on when I had my mentors, man named Del Van Dyke in Sacramento, he taught us, if you work clean, you always work. So, companies want to hire you, churches, temples, old folks' homes. No one wants to be leaving there feeling like they need to wash their mouth out with soap. So I was kind of trained to work clean, and of course my mom threatened me too. She better not use any dirty language. So I think when mom says don't do it, you gotta take that to heart. And it's worked out well. I think people are almost surprised. They say, "Wow, couldn't believe you're that funny and you didn't use any cuss words." I'm like, it's kind of sad that we've been conditioned where people think it's not really shocking or funny unless there's an F-bomb in there or S-bomb, or it's a different era. But the clean comedy's making a comeback. This Dry Bar Comedy channel that I taped for back in January, they're now the largest online distributor of comedy content. They surpassed Comedy Central for downloads and people, accessing their content through a phone or computer or iPad. So that's an exciting trend. I think people are hungry for cleaner content. And, I think maybe it's nostalgia to go back to the old days when things weren't so crazy and everyone wasn't at each other's throats. I don't know, but I'm glad the trend's here, it's open. It's helped me reach a lot of other audiences, some younger and older folks that may not have listened to my stuff, and I like the challenge too. You really have to try to think through things. You can't rely on shock and awe. You have to let the words be descriptive in a funny picture making way instead of a shock value cussing way.
And would you advise somebody just trying to break into comedy for the first time to work clean, or is that not advice you would hand out?
Well, again, it depends if they want to do this as that's their career and they want to have a lot of access. I would say cleaner's better. Now, there's some people who have been successful. They started out dirty, they stayed dirty, they found their niche audience, and they're not going to change it. So that's the thing about comedy. It being a creative endeavor, you can't really say, well, you got to work clean. Or you're not. It's the individual preference, but I can definitely say from my career that's benefited me immensely, and I think if I was to give advice, I'd say that's the way to go. But number one thing is you got to be true to yourself. If someone may have been raised in an environment where all they knew was colorful language and off-color topics, and you got to be in your lane and your comfort zone. So if that's where you're comfortable, God bless you. I hope that works. You find the audiences you want to find, and they find you.
And what other advice would you give for anyone listening who might want to do stand-up?
Well, number one is try to write every day, even if it's just get a notebook and jot down thoughts and see what comes out that's funny. Remember, what's funny to you on paper may be super funny to other people. They may not get it. When you get out there, pretty much the process is to get in, find some open mics or some comedy clubs with a showcase night where you can go and try to do 3 to 5 minutes. See what if you're comfortable on stage. See what you can come up with for 3 to 5 minutes that you find funny. Record that thing. My advice to new comedians: never bring your family at the first show. Let them save them from when you need them. If you're doing a comedy contest or your first paid show where you need audience members. Because one, it can be pretty brutal, and two, if it is brutal, they're probably not going to want to come back and see you again. So I think it takes less pressure, puts less pressure on yourself and less pressure on your family to have to lie to you and say, "Oh yeah, that was great," when they're clenching their teeth. So yeah, that's number one is find the open mics. Even in small towns now, you got all sorts of places that'll do maybe a once a month or once a week open mic night, and record all your sets whenever you can. Just get your phone out, listen back to what you said. You might find some gems in some of your throwaway lines or some statement that wasn't even part of your act that you just threw out as an observation that could become comedy gold. So just get up as much as you can and stay humble. Try to get advice from the working comedians. Try to find maybe a group you can write with. 1,001 things you can do just to try to get in this business, but be prepared for a lot of frustration and disappointment. I used to drive 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, because I lived out in the middle of the woods. I would drive to do showcase or open mic. Sometimes he would cancel, turn around, just drive home, or sometimes they would cut my time. I would get 5 minutes, I'd only get 3 minutes, or you're on the list, and then you got bumped because they had some working comedians and they wanted more time. So you have to be ready to put up with a lot of rejection, inconvenience, and inconsiderate people that have your interest is not their interest. So just be consistent, be focused on what your goal is, and try to create as much content as you can.
What drives you to keep going?
No one will hire me to work a day job now. I don't know what I would do. So I think I love my job, so I'm fortunate that I get to travel, meet folks that I would never met, talk to people like you that we would never cross paths. Been to 43 states in 11 countries. got to see the Northern Lights in Alaska, got to see sunset in the Marshall Islands and been to Singapore. So I think one that keeps me going is the curiosity of meeting new people and the challenge of performing for new groups. And the fact is, I just like being my own boss. That's one thing about comedy. You're the producer, you're the travel coordinator, you're the manager. You end up getting an agent and manager, but it's really a self-starter business. And I believe in the long run, the input and the output will eventually balance each other out. And if you put in enough effort, you're going to see some success at some level.
In our social political landscape, Mark, how has performing comedy changed?
I think people are a little less, on one hand, people are a little more sensitive to any topic that they feel is offensive to them, whether it be on the left, where it's a gender or a racial statement, or on the right, where it's an anti-Trump statement or perceived as anti-American. So I think where there's a heightened level of just of sensitivity right now in the country. But I think that's what I try to do with my comedy is just like, hey, I'm not going to make fun of one side over the other. I'm not going to go overtly political. I'll get my jabs in, but I'm going to do it in a hopefully a lighthearted way, not in a mean-spirited way. I think if you can bring a good spirit to comedy, people put up with it. But unless you have a significantly loyal audience and you're famous enough, like a Bill Maher on the left or Dennis Miller on the right, it's tough to be a super outspoken person at the club and small theater level without generating some animosity. And now it's crazy. People, get death threats. I'm like, celebrities, not no one at my level yet. I'm saying that's when I know I've made it, when I get a death threat.
Mark, do you or did you at one time have an idol of, a comedian that you emulated or wanted to emulate, or thought, gee, I'd like to be like him or even like her? Was there anyone?
There was no one that necessarily stood out. There was people that I admired. I think Bill Maher has a lot of bravado. A lot of people don't care for him, but I like someone who's unflinching and will say what they mean and stand by their words. I liked from childhood. I was a real big fan of Flip Wilson. He had his variety show. He played a lot of comedic characters and seemed like he had really, he was just super talented. I think originally too, I liked Rich Little a lot. I still like him, but I think as a kid I wanted to be an impressionist, but I was never quite worked at it. I do some character voices and some accents, but I've never really been able to nail down. I'll do a little. I take that back. I do a little bit of Dr. Phil, a little bit. It's not much. I'm trying. So, other comedic idols. Yeah. No, I always appreciated George Carlin and Cosby back in the day, and all the titans of comedy, and I have a lot of respect for these comedians that have been working on the road for years. That no one really knows them, but they can take a bar full of drunk people and a little club full of that may not have a lot of audience members and make it into a memorable night, and not get scared by the less than ideal circumstances.
Do you write all your own material, Mark, or do you buy from other people?
No, I write all my own material. I have some friends that'll give me like a tagline, like I was talking about doing Armed Forces Entertainment shows in the Middle East, and I said, yeah, I was in Bahrain and Kuwait, and then I went to the East African nation of Djibouti, and I went on my joke. My buddy says, oh yeah, tell me you got your first Djibouti call. So now I say that. I say, I went to Djibouti. So my friend wrote it for me, but so does that make sense? So sometimes we as comics, we try to give each other taglines and tweak words here and there. So that's part of the fun, is you get to work with some really creative people that are willing to help you, and then you get to help them, upgrade their material and hopefully make some tweaks. But yeah, it's.
I'm sure that when you were first starting out, you weren't making enough money to support yourself solely on comedy. So what kind of day jobs did you take?
Well, let's see. When I started comedy, I was already married with 2 children, and I was self-employed, owned a driving school. So I did that, and then I taught traffic school classes for people who got tickets. Then did some substitute teaching. Yeah, that was less than ideal. Middle schoolers they smell blood in the water when there's a substitute teacher.
Oh yeah.
So did that. Did some insurance inspections. In fact, I'd go on the road. I'd like be doing a bar or small comedy club like in Medford, Oregon, and I'd stop and do an insurance inspection at a tire shop or a bowling alley on my way to the gig. And so I always managed to hustle up some extra work on the side, which was very helpful because and being self-employed was super helpful because I was able to kind of set my own hours and go out on the road for a few days. Yeah.
And are you still married? And how old are your children now?
My ex-wife and I have been divorced for 7 years. Unfortunately, we were married for 22 years. I tell people we stayed married because neither one of us wanted custody of the kids. So they're grown now. I have a 29-year-old daughter in the Bay Area. She's a great dancer. She's getting a Master of Fine Arts at St. Mary's College, an MFA in dance. It's performing arts. And then I have her name is Haley, and my daughter Allison is in New York City. She's a jazz guitarist. Graduated from Sacramento State with a double major in jazz and jazz studies, and what was the other one? Vocals, I think. I remember that. I forget that, but she's carved out a good career in New York City. She plays clubs there and has done some touring, and she just got involved with I think it's the Harlem Repertory Theater. She's a guitar player in their latest musical. She'll be at Lincoln Center in November, so I'm going to go see her perform at Lincoln Center, which is amazing. My oldest daughter Haley performed at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. with St. Mary's College when she was an undergrad. And my other daughter performed at Lincoln Center. And me, I'll be performing at the Wenatchee Center Bar and Grill in Washington. So whose career's done better? I guess it's a question for the family.
Well, you certainly have what to be proud of with your daughters. That's for sure.
They're super amazing. And we were very blessed. They were always stellar kids and didn't give us too much trouble. The usual girl drama, but kid drama. But that's part of the deal. And both self-sufficient. No one's living in my basement, so I'm thankful for that because I don't have a basement here. So.
Well, Mark, we're almost out of time, believe it or not, and I want to make sure that our listeners know where they can find you on the web. It's www.laughwithmarc, and that's MARC.com.
That's right.
www.laughwithmarc.com. Any final words before I say thank you and disconnect and do a commercial and go on to my next guest?
Well, no, I just want to say I appreciate being on the show. Continued success to you, and I hope everyone gets to visit the website, check out some of my material, and have a laugh, and stay friends with me on social media. I got some links on there, and I look forward to talking with you again down the line.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on the show sometime. I'll give it a few months so we don't tire everyone out. And,
exactly. Yeah.
And I'll have you back.
Okay. That sounds like a deal.
Marc Yaffee, everybody. Marc Yaffee. LaughWithMarc.com. Take care. Bye now. And I've got to do a commercial. This show is brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, publishers of books for adults and kids, fiction and nonfiction. This week featuring Miss Never Pleased by Aisha Marfani, the story of a relatable character in today's children's lives. Naive and self-obsessed, nothing could ever please her. She thought herself flawless and perfect. The diary belonged to the girl who strived to be perfect yet failed miserably. Her pursuit of perfection made her displeased with almost everyone around her. A tragic failure in life taught her that being perfect in this world is not possible, and striving for perfection can only lead to disasters. She learns to embrace people and life with imperfections and discovers the art of living a happy life. The purchasing link, if you want to buy it, is https://www.amazon.com/miss hyphen never hyphen pleased hyphen Aisha, that's AYESHA hyphen Marfani, MARFANI /D like in dog, P like in Peter /1681 605 732. Okay? And now let me get my next guest who's trying to ring into me. Hold on, and let me. Donald, sorry I missed picking you up, but I was in the middle of doing a commercial.
Okay. It's good to hear your voice.
My guest is Donald. Donald, do you pronounce it Riggio or Riggio?
Riggio, R-I-G-G-I-O,
Riggio, okay. As a teenager, growing up in the Bronx, New York, Donald got caught up, in the music scene called Beatlemania and the British music invasion. Like all teenage boys that age, he had to start a band to impress the girls and pursue the dream of fame and fortune. When real life intruded, his dream faded, but his love of listening to music and going to shows continued. After many years, he realized that his contribution to keep the music alive would come from the written in a series of historical novels. Donald Riggio is the author of a series of rock and roll novels chronicling the evolution of the genre. 7-inch Vinyl, which covers 1953 to 1969, Beyond Vinyl, 1969 to 1986. Both books were Kindle #1 bestsellers in the music category. The third book in the series, When Gold Turns to Gray, covering 1986 to 2001, was published late last year. He is currently working on the fourth installment, 7-inch Vinyl, a final encore. So, have I covered it pretty well, Donald?
Pretty much. Very, very informative, and thank you.
Donald, I take it that although these sound like the titles of nonfiction, you say you've written historical novels, so they're fiction.
That's correct. I have multiple storylines. I have a fictional storyline, which is characters that I've created and take them through the years, as I mentioned in each book. I also have a music storyline, which covers real-life rock and roll, and my characters interact with those real-life people and events in rock and roll music as it transpires through those years. And I also have a storyline of real historical events and how the music affects history and history affects music.
Well, now, how can a reader tell which parts of your story are true and which parts are fiction?
Well, that's a good thing. I think it's really a good thing if the readers can't, because it makes it more realistic. I mean, I have fictional characters who are based on people like Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, some of the doo-wop groups in New York in the 50s, some of the female groups in the 50s. But, I just keep them separate. My fictional female group in the 60s is kind of based on all those girl groups, the Shirelles, the Chiffons, the Supremes, all those girl groups. So there's fiction, their story is fictional, but people are able to meld them in with the real life characters, real life people in music.
Well, but for instance, now, suppose I read one of your books and I read about somebody getting recorded, writing songs, whatever. How would I know if that really happened or if it was made up by you?
Well, again, I feel that's a positive thing. If you can't tell fact from fiction, I think you've really succeeded in doing what your goal was, to really just put fictional characters in that way. I mean, anything that that the fictional characters do, you can't really say that, that's based on this, or that's based on that. But I just placed them right in that genre, in among all the real life people who were performing music during that time.
Donald, are you a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, I am a plotter. I sit down and I plot every move because of those multiple storylines. I have to know where my fictional characters are going to be in the beginning of the book. As the years go by, I have to make sure that they mature in that time frame, along with the real life people and events and the real historical events. And I was kind of concerned about doing that in the beginning, but my first book had such success that a lot of people enjoyed the little real life history vignettes that were in there. So everything had to be plotted out, beginning, middle, end. I knew it when I sat down who my characters were going to be. I wrote out character traits and their ages as they got through the years, and what they would do and how it would go. And I knew where the books would begin, and I knew where they would end. So I'm a heavy plotter.
Donald, you've self-published, is that correct?
That's correct. In the beginning, like most novelists do, I had dreams of being traditionally published. I pitched the first novel to several agents and publishing houses without any success at all. And then this was right around the time when self-publishing was really becoming the big thing. So I quickly changed over and I self-published. The first book was published by an outfit up in Denver, Colorado. And then the next two were done through CreateSpace with Amazon.
And do you have a particular time when you like to write? Do you have a day job and write at night, or do you write during the day, or what's your schedule?
Well, when I was putting the first book all together, I was working. I was still living in New York. I had a day job. I worked for the Consolidated Edison Company in New York. And all of that research that I did while I was working. But I had the opportunity to take an early retirement. So when I retired and my wife and I moved to Las Vegas, I concentrated all my time there afterwards into writing. And that's when I actually finished and published the first book. But as far as day, I try to write every day, whether it's research, whether it's plotting, whether it's actually physical creative writing. I try to do that. I usually get up, not unusually early in the morning, But once I do my email things and things like that, I get into whatever portion of the book that I'm working on. I have a little thing that I use when I finish writing at night. I never finish. I always know what the next sentence is going to be, so that when I get up the next day and I start writing, I start with that sentence, and that kind of kickstarts me into the writing.
Is any portion of your books autobiographical?
Yes, well, it's kind of. The first book takes place in Bronx, New York. That's where I grew up, in a housing project in the Bronx, New York. So all of that is autobiographical, but the characters are not. Back in the days when I was living that out, and I did form a little band when the Beatles came out. I didn't form a singing group. We had a band. But in the book, it's a singing group. And so all of that stuff in the Bronx and the things that happen in the Bronx, yes, autobiographical, but beyond that, pretty much what I thought my future might be if I was a success in music, which I wasn't.
Well, maybe that's a good thing if it led you to being a success in writing.
That definitely. I was inspired by a lot of people. I met a lot of the people in the oldies groups from shows that I went to, and they all told it's a similar story. The story of those groups growing up back then is the story of all those groups. It's a composite. I mean, they see themselves, these performers who are still performing today, some of them, they see themselves back in that day when they were young and coming up and trying to make it. So, I think I've captured it pretty well.
And tell me, you've got a social media platform?
Oh, absolutely. A social media platform is vital, especially when you're self-published, because that's where you're going to reach most of your people. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, but Facebook is primarily where I do my marketing. I have a personal page and a couple of writing pages on Facebook. I put rock and roll posts up every day and put them up on my pages. There are several other pages run by other people who have given me permission to put my posts there. So people my motto is make people sick of seeing you on Facebook, so that they know who you are. This guy he's pretty knowledgeable. He knows what he's talking about. So that then, when I have something about the book to put up there, I put that in, with all the other posts, and I keep all these people. I have 3,500 Facebook friends, but I reach a lot more in the other pages that I post on. So it's vital. It's vital. I always tell young authors, writing a book is easy. Marketing a book is very, very hard work.
Yep, I agree with you. Now, I've had members of the Henderson Writers Group on before, and I believe you're a member of that group also, yes?
Actually, I'm vice president of the Henderson Writers Group. I've been with them about 8 or 9 years, and we have our little meet and critique meetings, and I was asked to run for vice president 5 years ago, and I've been in that position since.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How important is your writers group to you?
Again, that's vital for any author, because we have people, men and women, various ages. They're young, they're middle-aged, they're older, and they're kind of not floundering, but they need a place to come and read portions of their book and be critiqued about it. We have a no blood on the floor policy. We don't really pick apart anybody's work, but we kind of guide them in the right direction. Tell them about, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. You should try more to make the characters more vivid, make your description more vivid, make good action scenes, have good dialogue, and they all comment on us and tell us that we're doing, a good job. And we help them along. And we currently have about 90 members. We have 2 or 3 meetings at different places every week. And they come in there and they read and they take a lot of critique. And, they very much appreciate it. We've helped a lot of people get published.
Now, you're working on the 4th installment, 7-inch vinyl, A Final Encore.
Correct.
What's next after that?
I'm not 100% sure. The characters who've carried over from the first book they're really getting old, so, and I really hate killing off characters, but I'm not exactly sure where I would go after the 4th book. Maybe sometime down the road it'll come to me. This 4th book brings everything current. It brings it right up to today. So, and unless I want to get into creating some kind of rock and roll science fiction novel, I'd probably have to, but it would be music related. I love the music.
Would you share a passage from one of your books with us?
I don't have the books with me. I'm not at home, so I'm not able to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay. How about sharing an anecdote with us?
Okay, I can. Let's see. Let me think of something that was pretty funny in the book. If you remember the song "In the Still of the Night" by 5 Satins, that's like the number 1 oldie of all times. I'm sure you realize that.
No, I'm not a... Rock and roll isn't my thing, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, boy. Well, anyway, it's probably been any surveys that they had going back to the 60s. Radio stations would do surveys of the top 100 songs in rock history, and that would come out pretty much at number 1 every year. And it was written by a gentleman in the singing group, the 5 Satins, while he was walking guard duty on a military base in Germany. He was out there all alone, walking up and down, doing guard duty, and these words just came to him in his head. And when he got back to the barracks, he wrote down the lyrics, and it became this huge, huge song.
Well, it must have been huge because I'm familiar with it, and as I say, rock and roll isn't my thing, so it must have been huge if I know it.
And there's another one. There's a group called the Skyliners. They came from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Jimmy Beaumont was the lead singer, and he had a friend. Joe Rock was his name. They became his manager. And Joe Rock was driving home after he had leaving his girlfriend's house, and she told him that she was moving away and that she wouldn't be able to see him anymore. And he was heartbroken by that. And he sat in his car and he just thought up these lyrics. And when he saw Jimmy Beaumont the next day, he gave him the lyrics. Jimmy Beaumont went around to write the melody and the music. And the song became "Since I Don't Have You."
I don't know that one.
Oh, okay. We'll have to re-educate you somehow. You'll have to.
I'm afraid I'm into Broadway show tunes and what's called the Great American Songbook.
Oh yeah, I mean I love all kinds of music. I mean I don't just relate to rock and roll. I love all of that. The Great American Songbook is some great stuff. People like Tony Bennett and those guys like that. They were really, really wonderful. But there comes a time in every person's life, I guess. I don't like a lot of the really recent stuff that they call rock. But it's everybody's taste. But the idea is, in my way of thinking, I have a lot of young readers. And a lot of these younger people don't know the roots of the music that they're listening to today. But if you were to ask a lot of these artists of today, whether it was rap or hip hop or any of the current styles, ask what their roots are, and they would tell you, well, I listen to this, this, and this. And then if you trace that back from that to what those people listen to, you'd always end up back in 1953 down in the Mississippi Delta when R&B music started.
Uh-huh.
You can trace those roots all the way back, just from now all the way back to then. So I don't like to say that I teach a lot of people rock and roll, but I do show people where all of what they're listening to now, where it all started.
Well, rock kind of started with Rock Around the Clock, didn't it?
Well, yeah. Rock Around the Clock was, oh my goodness, I'm trying to think. Went right out of my head. But it really began in 53 in the Mississippi Delta. These black artists were singing in the cotton fields, and they were singing this type of music. And there was a gentleman who went down there with the recording equipment, and he recorded a lot of these in the churches, the choirs in the churches singing music, and the workers in the field playing music. And he brought it to other people's attention, and it just caught on from there.
Well, is that where Elvis got started?
Elvis, yes, he was influenced by a lot of the music that he heard in church, and he got started with that. And Sam Phillips, who ran Sun Music back then, Elvis went in and he wanted to record a song for his mother. So he paid whatever the price was for him to sing this song. And Sam Phillips, the owner of the music studio, he was looking for a white artist that sounded black. And he went to Elvis and he said, I'm going to sign you, and we're going to do all these songs. And that's where Elvis got his start.
Uh-huh.
And then that white music, just carried on. And back in those days, Sin, a lot of people don't realize that when black artists, rock and roll artists like Chuck Berry and people like that, when they recorded songs, white audiences didn't listen to them. So they wouldn't buy records by black artists. So that's where Pat Boone got his start. He would record white versions of the black music, and kids would buy the Pat Boone records to listen to.
Pat Boone wasn't a rock artist, was he?
No, he was not. He was just a singer, but he recorded a lot of those, like he recorded Good Golly Miss Molly. He recorded a lot of the Fats Domino tunes, and they were hits with the white audiences. And that's where his career then was launched by his own music, and then him doing these covers of black artists.
I think of Pat Boone as doing pop music like April Love, wasn't
April Love? Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So, but he was in that realm. He had those songs, but he also had songs by Fats Domino. He did Ain't That a Shame. He did a couple of other songs. He did Little Richard, Good Golly Miss Molly. He recorded all those songs, and they were hits for him only because white audiences didn't buy the records by the black audiences.
Was that a factor of prejudice, or was
that... No, well, yes, it was. It was. I mean, if you really want to dig into it and get into it, it was because, parents of the white kids didn't like their kids listening to black artists. But they didn't mind them listening to Pat Boone. But, luckily after a few years that all changed.
What changed it?
I think just the overwhelming saturation of the music got so big. I mean, record companies were springing up all over the place. People were looking for artists to do their music. I think the biggest thing that really propelled the black music into the fore was Motown, which was just in the mid-'60s. That was around the same time when I got interested in music, when Motown Records was formed, and they had artists like the Supremes and the Miracles and all these, the Temptations and all these groups. That kind of broke the color barrier, where everybody was listening to those groups and buying their music.
I gotta ask you, this is totally off topic, but you say you used to work for Con Ed. What did you do for Con Ed?
Well, I worked in an office. I was there for 37 years. I worked in an office in 708 First Avenue, not far from the UN, for many years, and then got transferred up to the Bronx and worked there for a bunch of years. And I worked in I worked in the engineering department, but I wasn't an engineer. I did a lot of paperwork and schematics and writing route sheets for the different crews. And I was working for Con Ed up in Rye, New York, on 9/11.
Ah.
And we called in all the crews that worked in Westchester, and we brought them into the headquarters where I worked, and we gave them their orders and sent them downtown.
Because I'm an old ex-New Yorker myself.
Where from in New York?
Well, I was born and raised out on the island, but
Okay.
I moved into the city, the Upper East Side, in 1961, and then I lived on the Upper West Side, which is still kind of home of my heart.
Okay.
And I lived for 4 years. I bet I can stump you with this one. What's the only part of Manhattan that's on the mainland of the Bronx? On the mainland, but it's not the Bronx, it's Manhattan.
Well, I don't know if that's true, but because one of the things I tell people about the Bronx is that the reason they call it the Bronx is because it's the only part of New York City that's attached to the mainland. But if you can tell me different, I'd love to hear it.
Well, the reason the Bronx is called the Bronx is because there was a family named Bronk, I believe it was Bronck,
That's correct.
that had a farm in what is now the Bronx, and
That's
people refer to it as the Bronx Farm or the Bronx.
Right.
And that's how it got its name. Now, the area from 225th Street to just shy of 230th Street, from a little bit east of Broadway up to, I can't think of the name of the street now, is a neighborhood called Marble Hill. And there really is a hill there. And the story is, and this is a true story, the story is that originally the river the North River that connects the Harlem and the Hudson.
That's called the Bronx River.
No, it's the North River. The Bronx River is something else. The North River originally ran north of 228th but south of 230th, and it was too narrow a shipping channel for ships to get through comfortably from the Harlem River to the Hudson River, and they would get to the Harlem River from the East River, of course. And so the Army Corps of Engineers cut a new shipping channel at 225th Street in the late 1800s, cutting off from the island of Manhattan the area from 225th to just shy of 230th, and from a little bit east of Broadway to this street that I can't think of the name of. And it was originally part of the island of Manhattan, but when the Army Corps of Engineers cut this new shipping channel, it cut off that part of Manhattan and attached it to the mainland. So it's as if it's part of the Bronx, but it isn't. The people who live in Marble Hill vote for the Manhattan Borough President, the Manhattan City Council members, and so on. They're served by Bronx services, garbage, Con Ed, police. It's I forget what precinct it is now, not the 3-4. The 3-4 is the precinct in the northern part of Manhattan. And it's the 2 something, I think. in the Bronx that serves Marble Hill. But it is legally part of Manhattan, and you can win bets from people without it.
Bar bet, that's a good... I learned something today. Thank you very much for that.
Donald, what I'm going to teach you now is how to sign off because it's time. Your website is www.wixtrilogy, WIXTRILOGY.com. Thank you very much, Donald Riggio, for being our guest today. This is Cynthia MacGregor reminding you to pass a smile along. And don't forget to join us again next week, same time.
You have been listening to In the Spotlight with your host, Cynthia MacGregor, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing. For a wide variety of books for both adults and children in print, ebook, and audio formats, join us every Tuesday at the same time as In the Spotlight brings you interesting guests who entertain and enlighten you. I'm Carly McCracken. On behalf of Crimson Cloak Publishing, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week.